Welcome everyone, this is Jacqueline Jax and I'm here to teach you how to make this adorable little pumpkin ACEO. If you're unfamiliar with ACEOs, they are artist cards and they're used for trading art, also for sale if you want to purchase collections from an artist. They're really cute, and if you need the cards, you can purchase them at jaxwatercolor.com. We have these little sets that include the cards, protective shields for them, and some paint. Enjoy. All right, so let's paint some pumpkins, shall we, for the season. The watercolor set that you're seeing here is the Pumpkin Glow set. This one came delivered to our subscribers in the fall watercolor subscription. That was also paired up with 2 other sets in that subscription, and there are videos on the channel as well for those. So when you're talking about painting pumpkins, it can be a little tricky, right? Because orange is not the easiest color to manage. So I'm going to show you in this video how to paint with orange and also how to mix colors when you have orange present. And I promise it will be painless and very easy and simple. So starting with our ACEO card, and that is a 100% cotton card. They are about 2.5 by 3.5 in size, and 300 GSM are the ones that we sell over on the website. So they're very sturdy, they are archive quality, and they come in these nice little packets so that you can protect your art pieces. I'm going to be using a pointed round brush. This one is by Princeton. It is one of my favorites. It is a lot larger than you would think because it has a nice firm tip on it. So size 12, yes, holds a lot of water, holds a lot of paint. That is just because I prefer to use that and it reloads well. You can use whatever it is that works for you and that you like. I encourage you always to test out a lot of brushes and see what works. So when it comes to painting pumpkins, it can be tricky, right? A lot of people will just paint one big round blob. I like to do it a little differently because I like texture and I like to leave light that I can play with later. So that's what you're going to be learning here. As you can tell, I'm just starting in the center of the pumpkin, and I'm doing kind of like a slanted dollop, right? It almost looks like a teardrop, but it's a thinner teardrop. It is a little more pointed at the top, slightly curved as you go around the pumpkin, and you can vary the strengths of the color, which I highly recommend. Another thing I recommend doing on pumpkins to give them a lot of variety and texture right off the bat and dimension is to leave white space in between each pumpkin piece. So kind of look at it like you're drawing it in slices, you know, like little watermelon slices or little cantaloupe slices. That's the best way to associate it. The more curvy they are with that gentle curve, or like a little more angle, then the fluffier your pumpkin's going to be. The less curvy, the taller your pumpkin is going to be. So you can do skinny pumpkins, you can do plump pumpkins, you can do really short pumpkins, all kinds. It just depends on how much you bend in those brush strokes. But as always, it is thinner at the top and slightly thicker at the bottom, but not as thick as the center. So the center is going to be the most puffy, thicker area, and then the bottom is going to be the second most thick, and the top is going to be the thinner. The more bend on the top, the more it's going to look dimensional. So just as a rule, you can see those C curves, right? Every curve gives it more and more fluff, and that is pretty much my secret to pumpkins. Now, as you're doing the shapes and practicing that, I want you to think about how to reflect light. Now, we are leaving white space, which is always fun in watercolor because you can do a lot with that later. The other thing I'm doing is I am switching up between using full strength of the plump pumpkin watercolor from the set, and then I'm using like half strength and even what's left on my brush. You can opt to use it wet or even use a dry stroke because everything kind of goes and works together. What you don't want in your pumpkins is to have the exact same weight and color all the way through. It can be the same color, but it has to have different values because without those values, you get a very flat look. Now let's think about dimension and how to paint dimension, right? So along with the white space, which is giving us a nice like definition for our pumpkin right away without a lot of work, you want to think about the lights and the darks and how you can play with the lights and the darks within the same shade, but then also mixing shades together. So the first thing I'm doing is sticking with my same shade and getting my 3 pumpkins just into the mix, where I'm going to position them, how they're going to shift, what they're going to look like. Within that painting session there, right as you're seeing it, there are lights and darks, like I reminded you before. There are wet areas and dry areas. The wet areas, when you touch wet on wet, it's called charging the paint. So that means you're charging in more watercolor. If it's dry and you're painting over it, that's called layering. So you will layer or glaze over the same color or a different color to create a glaze. Glazing is not the same if it's wet. Glazing can only happen when something is wet on dry. But charging is only happening when it's wet on wet. We're going to use more of that later as I paint my background. So now I'm taking a little bit of the purple shadows and the Capri blue, mixing it together and just kind of creating this really dark atmospheric background. Now, one thing I'm doing here that you're seeing is I'm not painting it all the same color. I'm not using the same shade. I'm adding a little more blue, adding a little more purple. Sometimes it's a bit lighter and sometimes it's a bit darker. But the whole area is wet right from. Now I'm painting wet on dry, so I'm not starting with wet. The reason why is because we want to have control of where that watercolor goes. If we did this on wet paper, we would not have control and we would have quite the mess. But what I want you to pay attention to here is that in some areas, I'm going to let the dark color bleed into the pumpkin because I haven't let it dry completely yet. Now, if you don't want this to happen at all, by all means, let the pumpkin dry before you add another layer and then you glaze it on. But I want some of that purple and blue bleeding into my pumpkin. The reason why is because if my pumpkins don't have any shadow, they're going to look a little more flat than if they did. So I feel like watercolor is such a lovely medium that bleeds when you want it to. So I can add shadows in a really kind of organic, modeled way by letting them bleed in. Now, if it bleeds in too much and my pumpkin's too wet, if it gets carried away, I could always draw it back. I can either delete the color or I can use a tissue or a cotton swab and I can bring it back. So now as we go into the top area, and I've already painted my pumpkin stems, I'm taking a little more blue version of the purple blue shade, and I'm going to paint it with a little more fluidity through this upper area. Now my goal is to get a little bit of the pumpkin color into that area because I don't want it to be the same dimension and definition as the bottom. I feel like the bottom could be more shadowy and the top could be a little more airy. And in order to get that, maybe I'll dry back a little bit of the water and let some of the pumpkin color bleed up. That to me looks really cool because it's kind of spooky. It's a little bit creepy, right? And it gives that like really unique look that only watercolor can bring. That texture of mixing stuff on paper. And also the color mixed together gives us a really lovely neutral that does lean on the blue shade, but also has a little bit of a glow. So by knowing that this pumpkin, this plump pumpkin color, and the purple shadows and the blue Capri can mix and give us a slightly tinted neutral, we now have more control over lights and darks. Because we know now we can mix this color. We can add more pumpkin if we want it to be more brown and neutral. We can add more purple if we want it to be more purple. And we can add more blue if you want more of a hazy kind of gray blue as our shadow. Whatever it is as an artist that you like, that's what you should do. That's the color you should seek. And go by the eye. Just do it as you go along and enjoy the the journey, because that's what it's for. As you can tell, I'm using this color and the tip of my brush to kind of go in on some of those areas next to the white space. I'm giving it a little more definition. I'm adding a little shadowing here and there. Now this is a very small piece of artwork, so be careful. You don't want to go in too heavy-handed, but you still want some style lines. You still want some sketchiness to it, because I feel like that's just that next level of detail that doesn't get carried away, but at the same time, it really does carry the eye and cause the piece of artwork to be a little more interesting. Now you can also opt for some shadows under the pumpkin. I have not done this on this particular piece, but if you want to, this would be a good time to start shadowing under your pumpkin and making that just a bit darker at the bottom. For now, I'm just going to take advantage of the curves, the lovely curves of the pumpkin, and accent those with a little bit of the shadow color. Feel free to do anything that you desire, because it's not about the end result necessarily. It's more about the journey and the adventure that you're on. Remember that this beautiful season is rich in color. It's the wrap in the world before winter's hush. It's this time when we are inspired the most by the season, the rich, lush foliage and the soft, shadowy hues of crisp evening walks. I love this time of year. I love the colors. I love the paintings. And most of all, I love that you're on this journey with me. So from rustic harvest to misty fall landscapes, let's paint a bunch of really cool stuff in these beautiful scents of cinnamon, the golden leaves, and the magical glows of the autumn light. I think you'll learn a lot this season because there's so much to see and so much to pay attention to. So whether you're outside walking and noticing all the trees, noticing how the light has changed and taking on all the rich colors, or you're sitting at home for a cozy afternoon with a warm mug, just know that we're here together and we're here to paint something really, really wonderful. So to finish off our pumpkins, I think it's good to stand back. I think it's good to take this moment and look at what you have. Of course, I always encourage you guys to watch the tutorials all the way through once and then go back and paint alongside of me, because you kind of know what's coming ahead. Keep a tissue on hand for blotting out anything that you feel could be a little lighter or could benefit from a little bit of a texture that maybe the tissue can give you. Also keep a pointed round in several different sizes on hand. If you noticed right now, I have a smaller brush that isn't too small. It actually has a larger head than you would think, and I'm using it to delete some color. So by just making it clean with a little damp cloth, I can actually pull some color out in areas where I feel like it bled too close. And that gives me another layer of definition. Now this is just my way of going backwards. You can always do this forwards by letting the layers dry. But if you don't let the layers dry and you feel that some parts could benefit by pulling out some color, like right here, then just take a damp brush that is thick enough to hold water and dry that off, and then just ease it right over the areas that you want to remove the color. Blot that on your paper and then go back for another pass until you have the right desired effect. But you see how nice that looks just by doing that? And then I take the same brush and I add a little darker version of my color in areas in a sketchy way so that I can really amp up that contrast. By doing this, I've not only made the pumpkin a little bit brighter, but I've also added almost a glaze of boldness to the pumpkins. It kind of gives it a little more shadowy, right? Shadowy effect. But at the same time, those light effects next to the white, where it's lighter pumpkin color, it gives you that feeling of dimension. So here's my final piece. Now, of course, there's a lot of other fun fudging we can do here. We can, do different little effects and add some blots or add some salt. There's so many ideas that you guys can do when you do your pumpkins. I can't wait to see them. Please don't forget to share them on Facebook in the beginners watercolor group. I think that we're going to have a lovely season here, and these colors are so much fun to paint with. I can't wait to see what you all come up with. Don't forget, this Pumpkin Glow watercolor palette set is including Plump Pumpkin, Evergreen, Capri Blue, and Purple Shadows. All of this is handmade watercolor selected for its pigment vibrancy. It's light fast and it's exceptionally bold. There is a lot more pigment in the watercolor that I make than the average, with no fillers to dilute it out. So you probably will have an easier time mixing the colors from Jack's watercolor without having a muddy effect. You guys have a great day, and thank you so much for being here. I truly hope you enjoy this season as much as I do, and I can't wait to see you again on the next tutorial.